This very special episode of Graveyard Carz is near and dear to my heart. I have chose to celebrate our 100th episode of Graveyard Carz by airing the original pilot. I'm doing this because you, the audience, are why we are now on our 100th episode. You, the audience, the Graveyard Ghouls who write in, who feed back. We learn from you. Graveyard Carz has evolved from what you're about to watch, the original pilot, to where it is now. I had a dream, I had a vision for Graveyard Carz to become a show that people would watch, that they would learn from, and that would celebrate my love of Mopars. We did it almost 11 years ago. We had one camcorder we owned, the other one was borrowed from our producer's father. We had a used microphone setup that we bought on Craigslist, and we had a lot of heart. And it is that heart that has put us where we are today. The same heart that has gotten our Phantom Cuda that everybody said couldn't be done, done. So remember, as you watch tonight's episode, very special, anything you see in that episode that you like and would like to see more of, let us know. If you hated it, I want to know that too. But just know, this was something I chose to share with you because I wouldn't be here, Graveyard Carz wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. Thank you guys. So with that, enjoy the show. Dome Dome?
Hey buddy.
To the theater we go. Episode 100. Somebody turn the lights on.
Coming up on this very special 100th episode, Mark and Royal reveal never-before-aired footage of the original unbroadcasted Graveyard Carz pilot. Witness the origin of the Phantom Cuda, the original GYC team, and the first on-camera reveal that would have launched the series. Stay tuned. If you're a fan of GYC, this is the never-before-seen story of where it all began.
Can't believe it.
11 years?
2007, we started filming this thing.
Wow.
2007, we started on the pilot. And here we are, 10 years later, well, 11 years later. Gonna do a commentary on it.
Let's go.
You ready? See if I can see anything. 10 years ago, I could see without glasses.
Yeah, me too.
Are you ready? Let's hit it. Worst car I've ever took on in my entire career.
Graveyard Carz in 5,
Junk.
4,
Wadded and twisted.
3,
Should have been scrapped.
2,
This car that you're seeing right now, that's the Phantom Cuda, what we call the Phantom Cuda, which we delivered last year. I know you know.
Yep. Wow. It was beat.
It was. Everything that you see in this pilot episode was real. Like the first time I had gotten the door open on it, the pulls that we did on the unibody. That car is a 71 Cuda 440 6-barrel 4-speed. It was a track pack 354 car. It was one of 108, and probably only one of a small handful that were actually shaker hood in Tor red. Those are all the things that led up to why that car should be built. That's a very rare car, and I'm glad that we did. I remember the day we filmed this. This is Aaron's dad, Preston, driving the GTX Tribute we built with a 440 Super Commando, and that's our 71 Cuda that later became the Phantasm Cuda with Don Coscarelli and Michael Baldwin.
Okay.
And that was a real race, and we were neck and neck. It isn't a fantasy show. It's a reality show. It's a reality show about restoring Chrysler muscle cars back to their OE condition. We make them perfect, exactly the way they were. Graveyard Carz, like the show, and the shop really, which is all in one now, is kind of linked at the hip with the 71 Phantom CUDA. I mean, it was that CUDA is what inspired me to even film the things that we did, because people were out there, just for those that don't know,
saying it couldn't be done.
Yeah, there was a big internet pushback on that car about how we were going to rebody it because it was too bad to save, and
it traveled the shows right across.
It had, yeah, exactly. That's what kind of, I think, got its notoriety. Before we bought the car, my client, it had been to Mopars at the Strip, it had been to Chrysler's at Carlisle, Mopar Nationals. The guy was trying to sell it at all those places. After traveling around, and I believe he wanted $70,000 for it. He had it all in the back of this little crap trailer. I mean, it was a wadded up mess. And it wasn't until he got back to Oregon and talked to me, and we were able to put a deal together.
Nice.
I've been told they're like Vienna sausages at the end of my hand. That set right there was our old set at 34th and Main. That me and one of the guys that's in this show, Joe, in this episode, he actually built the fireplace back there. And then some of those books up there were given to me by a very good friend of mine up in Portland. And here we are, we're going down in the crypt, and then you come out here in the. We were creative back then.
We're learning.
There was a lot to learn. There was a lot to learn. And there still is.
Oh, absolutely.
Honestly, it's the fans that really have kind of moved the needle on Graveyard Carz from this, our original idea, to where we are now. You can't get the correct nuts and the bolts that fasten. That was our old graveyard down at 34th and Main Street out back. There was quite a few cars. There's the old Caddy hearse,
yep,
which is now down at Springfield Auto Recyclers.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's where we played that paintball game.
Oh, that's where you shot me in the back, isn't it?
Only twice.
SOB.
No, I think.
Oh, now this is ridiculous. What an OE restoration is. So I commissioned my Graveyard Ghouls to prepare this short educational film. Please enjoy. And this is one of my favorite little things we made. I realize it's campy. That is a tribute right there to the Universal Studios old airplane that used to go around the globe. Aaron Smith narrated this. He did such a great job.
Yeah, he did.
From the earliest horse-drawn buggy to Henry Ford's affordable mass-produced Model T, man has sought the most efficient mode of transportation. At first a mere means of conveyance, it didn't take long for the automobile to become available to everyone, and the age of customizing.
When we made this, it was in the spirit of a school film. Remember how you'd watch those corny-ass school films?
Safety films.
Yeah. And it took a lot of time. We found a lot of stock footage that we could use, and we came up with this. And it was really just a way to kind of introduce what an OE restoration was, because even 11 years ago, it wasn't quite as prevalent as it is today.
Yeah.
And that little dog right there, that inspired my dog Bella to get a little pair of glasses. We lost Bella last year, but I loved her. She looked just like that. Precious thing.
Kind of reminds me of a safety film I'd seen.
Now that's real footage of the day we were out drag racing with the 67 Satellite, and that's a 71 Challenger 383 shaker car, and that's the Phantasm CUDA before we did it.
426 Hemi with a compact and sure-footed Plymouth Barracuda.
And so in the spirit of that whole thing right there, what we were trying to convey is that there's a lot of restorations, there's a lot of custom work that's been done to cars, and they're called customizing, right? But the OEM, the original equipment manufacturing, that's what I wanted to get across in this, is that it's a smaller market than the custom market, but it's also very specialized. OEM means that you're going to take that car that's 40 years old and you're going to restore it back to exactly the way it was when it rolled off the assembly line. So that throws out your wheels and your tires, your aftermarket stuff like that, throws out your aftermarket headers. It puts it exactly the way that the guy who designed it or the team that designed it back in that exact same condition. That's an OE original equipment manufacturing. We couldn't find a Mopar, so we had to go with the 55 Chevys, but got the point across. Had a protocol that each car met prior to being shipped. That picture right there is from an assembly line photo at Hamtramck, Michigan that we used and we animated. I look kind of svelte there, don't I? To detail. that has given Graveyard Carz international record.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know in today's climate if that little animated bit would be accepted or pretty cornball. Coronet was the first. So the car we're looking at right now was a car I had bought for a client up in Canada. Same guy that owned the 71 Cuda. It was a 69 Coronet 440 4-speed car, and they made, I think, 1,541 of those cars. But you know, these were early days, and so that's why as you watch this, and I'm talking about how we have to recycle so many parts, like in that opening bit out in the graveyard, because there weren't.
They didn't make them like they
You did have to unbolt a car and do those things to find the parts that you needed to be able to restore.
The red Coronet was just a beautiful car when it was done. I remember as it was going together.
You remember when we drug it out of Cottage Grove, out of that guy's barn down there in Cottage Grove, and he was the one that actually drove it when it hit the moose up in Canada or Alaska, wherever he said it. I guess it was Alaska. It was a pretty car, and it was a nice complete car. But I'll tell you what's tough about that. If you look at these shots like they just showed there, that whole interior was red. It's hard to find good Survivor red stuff 11 years ago, and it's hard to find good reproduction stuff 11 years ago. So that interior was a challenge to put together.
Yeah, it was a setback.
We were really scrambling to get that car done on time and meet the deadline. You know, my worst fear was when we started making the pulls on it, that the quarter panels were just going to rip off the car, that the roof was going to pull away from the A-pillars, that the firewall wasn't going to walk out. So it was important, other than Fernando and myself. So there it is, 71 Cuda, 446 barrel 4-speed. Now what I'm introducing people here to, that I had said in the beginning that we're going to use equipment you'd never seen before. I don't know anybody that ever showed a frame straightening machine before. For those that are watching closely, that car is mounted in pinch weld stands right now. And our goal is to grab hold of that left quarter panel, pull it out to the factory length so that we could cut it off and replace it with a new one or a section of it. When you begin to lose original parts off the car, you begin to lose its value. You take off, both quarters going to be replaced. 5%. When I'm looking at something like that, this is just like a collision job. I remember when I took my ICAR classes, they said, what you got to think about is just reversing what happened. Forget all the science, forget all that stuff. Just reverse it, right?
That makes sense.
The very last part to get caved in will be the very first part to come out as you're pulling on it. And so that's the order in which you're going to do your stress relieving of your metal. So my thinking on that was, if we could save some of the quarter panel, save some of the floor, save some of the frame rails, then we could have those bragging rights. Now, as it turned out later, we couldn't. You know, it was just all so wadded up. As I go over this car with the employees, and like I say, the naysayers, you can see they laugh, they think it's funny that we're going to save this or save that, that kind of thing. But Fernando actually jumped right in here and really started making some good pulls on that car, and that's what you'll see happening.
I didn't make that up. Ask if he said it or not. No, he said it.
Look me in the eye without smiling and say it's the truth. The truth.
It's the truth.
See, why you smile like a fool? Because you're lying, that's why.
Nando, did you say that?
This car will be restored back to OE standards using as much original sheet metal as humanly possible. Yeah, when I'm talking about OE standards, I'm talking about original equipment standards. So when I'm basically making a reference to how it looked on the assembly lines, how it'll look today. Not just look that way, but be that way structurally. And that's a lot to say because it's a 40-some-year-old car at this time.
Yeah, so when you brought that, when you told me to come and look at that, when you towed it back, I had my doubts about restoring it. I mean, I guess I knew it could be restored.
Well, when everything...
But at what price? Anything's restorable if you want to spend the money.
Well, you said that in this pilot. You said anything can be restored if you have enough money. That's when you got in trouble just a minute ago. Yeah. It's either coming up or you just did it. I don't remember which. Hey, you were a naysayer back then. What is your problem?
No, I said...
Really make fun of Royal's head. Royal has no hair on his head. And he calls him Chrome Dome. And makes fun of him having a helmet on all the time. And hey, Royal, turn that light off over there. And there's no.
What are some of the nicknames I've had for you? I've had Chrome Dome, Swim Cap Head, Helmet Head, Cue Ball. Uncle Fester.
Cue Ball Morton.
Cue Ball Morton, which is a Cue Ball reference. Just as you know, I love old movies, especially buddy cop movies. That one was from The Last Boy Scout. There's a shine in here. I wonder what that is. The guy with the built-in football helmet. You know, I don't consider it an insult. You never felt like the names I called you were ever mean, right? They're always loving names, right?
Yeah.
Politically correct to point out to them, like Royal being bald. I've always felt my insults, so just like I said right there, they're terms of endearment, man. They're my way to, like I say, in a nice way, in a lighthearted way, to point out things that make you a freak, so you can do something about it.
Nice try, buddy.
Sorry. Look at the size of my ears. Talking about a freak. From the time Larry pulled the trigger on the car deal, I had 2 weeks to get the car done. In reality, there was about 6 weeks worth of work left on it. So here we have this car completely painted by our painter, but apart.
We're flying along.
This was a nice car, and in retrospect, I wish Larry had chose to keep it. I think it was a much nicer car than the one he traded for. I mean, I think the one that he traded for was a nice car, but when it came to rarity, okay, so they made 1,541 69 Cornet RT 440 4-speeds. They only made 733 RT SE70 Challenger 440 cars. So they made a lot less of them, but in reality, I think the Cornet was just a much neater car.
Yeah.
It was pretty, it was muscly. I love the scallops that were called out on the quarter panels.
I like the B-bodies.
It was a real N96, yeah. Yeah, I know, I do too. They have a place. The other car.
I had doubts whether we'd make it for the Cornet. Yeah, I mean, I really did.
So this is because of my #1 painter, Will. I told Will over and over and over again, I said, if you're going to panel paint this car, if you're going to paint it one panel at a time, you have to do all the paint mixed up at one time in 3 or 4 gallons like they do now, like they listen now. Back then he didn't. So when we bolt the hood and when the fenders and the doors on, they don't match the rest of the car. So that's me at about 1 o'clock in the morning in there working on getting that stupid car painted. Repainted, complete.
Repainted.
Yeah. Can you see it's all red? It's just the wrong red. So what I'm doing there is I'm using this a block for sanding, and I'm making sure the car's super flat. You see the piece of tape down the quarter panel, that's because I'm making sure the style line doesn't disappear. And I'm blocking that out so I can roll it into the booth and paint it. And I remember doing that, and it was late and I was tired. The problem about some of those shows is the camera hides everything. So when the cameras dive around these cars, they look like a sheet of glass. I don't know, maybe they got magic paint. Maybe they got the paint from the same place Jack got his beanstalk beans from, I don't know. Once Larry pulled the trigger, like I had said, we only had 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and they were bringing the car out from the Midwest, so it had to be ready to go that day.
Yeah.
It wasn't a fake deadline or something. It was real. Some of the early days, the guys couldn't get over the fact that there was a camera. So some of the guys that you're seeing now would play to the camera. They'd ask these ridiculous questions. So, Mark, what do you think of this Coronet? Just sand the car, man. And see how many coats of paint it actually takes to cover it. That's the real answer. If it's 10 coats, it's 10 coats. It's not magic paint. It doesn't have a brain of its own and say, oh, we should match. And what you see these guys doing right now is they're scuffing all the, I did all the blocking, but they're going around and scuffing all of the inner structure, like the jams, right? Because we've got to have paint adhesion. It can't be shiny. So that's what you see when you see them sitting there sanding and scuffing. They're using a red Scotch-Brite pad for good adhesion. Prepping a car has not changed in 100 years. If you want it to look right, if you want it to look beautiful like the cars do today, there is a ton of prep work. There's only a couple hours of painting, but there's months in some cases or longer of prep work. So this was our old booth. We had put a heater on this, and you see the filters inside there? That was the heat. It was called an FAF booth, a front airflow booth. And the paint jobs, we had to work so hard to keep the dirt out of them, so hard, because it would drag it in the front and they'd drag the warm air in across the car, so any dirt or impurities would hit the soft paint and stick in it, and then it would blow it out the back. This is back in the day when I painted the cars, before Will came along, back when they were perfect.
You always painted, he did all the collision work, right?
Yeah, he did the collision work, I did the restoration work. And he was good. It wasn't until the last few years that he's really gotten where he I don't want to say he's as good a painter, but he probably is. He's younger. He should be. He's been doing
had way
it.
more
Good
practice
Lord. He's
than
had
you
more
have in the
practice than
last
I ever had.
3
Yeah.
years.
He gets to work on 15 cars at a time. I'm working on one.
Yep.
But yeah, when in our new booth, the AFC, it's gorgeous. They come out clean. Very rarely, if something comes on that car, if you get a dirt nib in that car, it came off your body. It didn't come from outside.
Yeah.
It's because you were out sanding something when you shouldn't be. But that's cool. I love that. The way they timed the music to that was cool. Rain Man, make sure you get that 71 Barracuda up on that hoist for me, though.
Consider it done.
Yeah. The interesting bit. This car that you see them rolling around, we're going to use that car as the template to build our information for the torque boxes for the pole. This is a 71 Barracuda, originally 318 3-speed car. That car later became the 2016 SEMA 392 Hemi. That's the car right there.
That's the car.
Yep.
Oh, right on.
Yep. It was the nicest body. I'd been dragging her around with me forever. I had a clear title on the car, and all it was a shell. And I thought, well, someday I want to do a pro street. Well, when the opportunity to do the 392 Hemi from Mopar came up, that was the car.
Perfect.
We had to add torque boxes, like I said, like the 440 would have had to it. Mm-hmm. Now that's the old Genesis measuring system, and it was a really simple system. It would just simply measure the time it took for a light to hit that target and a front target, and it would tell you how many millimeters. It would equate it to millimeters. So you see the car's wadded up. You hang that target right there, and again, we're using that original virgin car that was never wrecked to gather the data, to harvest the data. Then we move it over to the other car and are able to use it to put everything in its exact spot. Now today, talk about the evolution of Graveyard Carz. Now we have so many cars and so much room, we actually build a frame jig and put all of those dowels, those pointing dowels in all the original spots. So now all we got to do is set a car down on those pegs, and once it hits those pegs, we're on the money. Established to be a beginning point for pulling. So a torque box oftentimes is 4 points that make up a square that the measuring system can recognize as good, established, solid starting points. Because if a car is all wadded up like this, you know, when you start working on making a frame pull, a unibody pull, there are a lot of things to consider. And obviously your goal is to get the car square at all of its measuring points. That's why we took the original one and measured it, so we know what those points would be. So you have to get the car square and flat in a good torque box before you start making the pulls and before you start measuring out the rest of the unibody on it. Most guys who have ever restored a car will tell you half the fun is the hunt. So ever since I was a kid and I would round up a car and make a deal on it, I always would take my time after getting the car and figure out. Love my murder board. I absolutely loved it. I thought that was the coolest thing. We built that whole thing.
Class.
It was. I wanted to be able to build a timeline for the car. I wish we had more time now to do stuff like that. I think that, to me, I thought that was a really fun bit. Every time we'd come up with some more information, we'd post it on the board. And you watch the old crime dramas, you know, before the CSI stuff, back when detectives were probably real detectives, before the computers. That's what they had. They build a timeline and they say there's no way that, you know, the chef could have done the murder. He was over here cooking this meal. And
it's Colonel Mustard.
Yeah, I never had that game. I had 4 crayons and a dead dad, so I didn't get Clue or whatever game that was. You know, one of the things that really made this the perfect storm, the Phantom Cuda, was that it also had this mystery about it. What happened to the original engine? Because when it was wrecked, it had a 318 in it. And it was still doing over 100 miles an hour. That's what this animation, Casey Ferris did all of this stuff, and it was so cool. When he was drawing these little cards like this, I thought it was so sophomoric, it was ridiculous. And now I sit back and watch it, and it really did a great job of telling the story about what happened. If you watch coming up here, we made this pilot just out of what little money I had in my pocket, and everybody was working for free back then. This animation shows exactly based on the interview I did with the actual guy that wrecked the car. Now, he never wanted to be on camera, so we changed some names around, but I actually spoke to the guy that was in the car when it was wrecked. And that's what this is representing. And he's really lucky. All he walked away with was a cut on his knee and some torn Levi's.
Wow.
We were able to trace back that the engine, we talked to a guy later that owned the car in 74, and he said the original 446 barrel was gone in 74.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that it had a 318 in it that he put in it. He bought it out here in Springfield with no engine or transmission, or no engine, but the transmission was there. And then he drug it home, and he put the interior out of his 1970 Grand Coupe Barracuda in it.
Oh.
He put the deck lid off of the luggage rack off of his Grand Coupe. That's why it had a luggage rack. It wasn't an original luggage rack car, M91. And he put the 318 out of it, and then he sold it off to another guy, and it's the next guy that wrecked it. So something between 71 when it was made, and it came from Idaho. We also learned that. Maybe in Idaho somewhere is the original numbers matching 446 barrel, but we were never able to find it.
Yeah.
I went over and looked at it, and
This guy, Craig Horesco, he was a really nice guy. He was a former owner of the car. He had a lot of history with it. I think he is the guy that had it when he bought it in 74 or so with no motor. I think that's the guy right there. There we are out on that's the actual chunk of road that this happened on. And so we found the original highway that it was wrecked on. We found the old Sheriff Carnahan's place, and we reenacted how the accident happened and where approximately it would have came to rest in the middle of that highway. The only thing that for me was, and I never did solve, is you saw the animation, how the car bounced around off the embankments.
Uh-huh.
There were no embankments on that road. There is the culvert, yeah. He may have misspoken and said an embankment, and he may have meant that culvert or whatever that is, that drain.
It's the drainage ditch.
That may be it. So if he went over and hit that and bounced up into the middle of the road, he was moving.
Oh, yeah.
There was a rumor. I spoke to the guy who was driving the old Ford truck that was in that animation.
Uh-huh.
He said there was an orange patch of paint across the roof of the truck. The truck was like an old brown truck or something. And I said, are you telling me the car went up and over the top of it? I never believed it because it never hit the roof. So if it went over the top of it, it would have been sideways or upside down and then came back down on its wheels. I think that was too far-fetched.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't add that in there.
Never know, though.
The guy that was driving it said he was doing about 105 when he went out around it, which is fine. That's what we did. You know, it had a 354 Dane in it. A 318 would move it that fast, would motivate it that fast. But
wow,
he should have been hurt a lot worse than that. That's the fact. I think by the time the car is restored in a year from now, this should be pretty much full of black ink and a lot of great memories. Should be a lamb fry, and go hang this over there in the other target for me.
what is a lamb fry?
So what you see right now is we have the Genesis. We're hanging the targets on it, just like we did on the original Virgin car. We're now hanging them on this wadded up mess. And now when we make a pull, when they come into the factory specs that we've already harvested and are stored in the computer, we know that things are where they're supposed to be. Again, back then, that's all we had, and that was pretty ingenious to kind of
sophisticated.
Yeah, it was sophisticated back then, yeah. God, you're a miracle.
It's just crazy, I know.
I've never seen anything like that in all my days. Turn that target around and face the scanner. What scanner? Scanner's sitting right in front of you. I think we better start with our width right there, and the width on the back is off too. It's 4. You see when they show the passenger door, see that patch of Bondo?
Uh-huh.
So that guy was working on that car. He said he was doing body work on it.
When he
like 2 days before he wrecked it. And that's old Bondo that's been exposed to the elements for 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, that can't be good.
No. But we ended up reusing that original door on that car. And you try to push it together, it crinkles. And in this case, that firewall did that right there. And that's what that front crinkle is in there.
I remember working on that.
Yeah, if you look at the crease on that firewall, it's so heavy. That's such a solid area. there's an animation of what we were going to try to do. And we did do a lot of it.
Yeah. We'll get a lot of that out.
And you have to. You have to have all those things out before you can actually start cutting panels off.
Wouldn't be easier to.
In some cases, if the rest of it isn't contorted, you could just cut that panel out, put it on a flat bench, straighten it out, and weld it back on. That's what I've been doing on the A100. That metal's so strong that it's impossible to make a pull on it. So I just cut it out, window it, put it on something, straighten it, dolly it, weld it back on the car. That was true right there on that door. That was the very first time since 1981 that door had been open. It took me a long time of working on it to get it. And when I finally realized that I had the latch where it would release, I waited for the camera guys to be there for it. So what I'm doing right now is I want to make sure when I pull that left apron down, you see that cord wrapped around there, that strap? I don't want the right-hand side to come down. So that's why I put a jack underneath the right apron over there on that side, on the right rail. Now I can pull this one down. If I didn't have that one over there, it might pull the whole car down, and then you'd have a height problem at the front of the car. And you watch some of this right here as he starts pulling on it. You can see it slowly start to move that firewall. See it pulling down, pulling down. Now I'm measuring the height of the frame rail. I want that frame rail to have the exact same height measurement that the other car had. If you could. That's one of the things I try to tell them always, be careful. There's no careful. You see the hat? I'd been using frame racks for many years. When I started my body shop, and I started Welby's in 85, I went into body work around 90. We had pretty rough, ugly old equipment back in those days.
That's all you could afford.
Yeah, it's all you could afford. And really, I couldn't afford that rack at the time, but I felt that it was important for us to be able to do this. So I took, I sold a couple of my cars at the time to fund this project, to get this Graveyard Carz off the ground.
That was a great rack.
Oh, it's a phenomenal piece of equipment. Oh my gosh, if I had a collision shop, that's the one I'd want. 3 towers. Each one pulled 10,000 pounds or 15,000. Oh, yeah. I have absolutely no doubt I'll be able to save everything. I always thought that I could, and I was right about that. Some of the skeptics that roll their eyes and do their little huffy-puffy things through their lungs were wrong again. And it was obvious as it was coming out that there was a bit of jealousy in their faces. You could see it. If you guys ever caught them, if you go around the car and you kind of catch them back, you'll see that they're hiding their green color of envy, because they know I was right.
There was the neck. There's the neck brace.
There's the neck brace. That tombstone right there that you see, that was out at the cemetery, the faux cemetery we built, and that picket fencing around there too. We built around it. Wrong year. We had the wrong year on it for when it came back to life. It was actually 81, not 82. I actually built a shaker to go on the top of that headstone, and we ran a windshield wiper motor, and that would make it shake.
I remember that.
Yeah, and then we put a fog machine in it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Look at all that hair.
He looks like a freak.
Look at all that hair.
Something that never changes, amazingly, is the phantom dents. There was not a dent in that hood, and then all of a sudden, overnight, there was an inside-out dent, which means somebody left a tool under the hood on the air cleaner, closed the hood, and then lied about it, denied it. Just couldn't wait to deny it, and that's what they did. So there I am again, getting ready to push really hard and make sure we made all the deadlines, and we did.
We always do. Barely.
Barely. Well, a couple of them we haven't hit, but for the most part we do. Because you usually, what it does to you physically and emotionally to try to get those deadlines. I mean, that's why I don't put them on anymore. Occasionally we have the SEMA things where they really are deadlines and you have to have them. But what I tell people when I bring the car in is, look, I'm going to do my best to knock this thing out, but there's no guarantee. Because there's no guarantee with the cars, there's no guarantee with the parts. Yep.
Doesn't matter, does it?
Thanks for playing Should I or Should I Not Question the Knowledge of the Great One. But we got the paint work done on that hood just in the nick of time. Got the wet sanding and the buffing done on it. We're able to get the hood back on it in time. But a lot of steps go into that. I don't miss that old shop a bit. That Coke machine you just saw in the background was one similar to the one I have now, except all the flavor strips, I changed them out to be the VIN numbers of the cars. That was another prop I built.
VIN numbers and colors.
Yeah.
large cardboard black box in this room.
And what's crazy about Darren looking around here for that box is I never said it was a large cardboard black box. I said flat box. So Fernando understood what I was saying. He went out and got it. Look at the wings on your hair.
Yeah.
What happened to that? You've lost even that now. Over the
Well,
years.
I'm so busy. It's hard to get it for a haircut every week. Okay, twice a year,
I look like a penguin.
whether it needs it or not.
The reason you saw that oval air cleaner underneath the hood is because it's an N96 car. It's a cold air induction, so it uses that long oval air cleaner like if you had a six-pack would have. Used the same lid, different base, but it's the same lid. But look at this last minute bolting the hood back on it. I mean, this guy's on
Those
his
hinges
way
off
out.
of my car?
I did not. Would you stop flattering yourself thinking I took a bunch of parts off the car? Yeah, I took parts off. You're darn tootin' I took parts off your car.
Well, that's what I was
You'll
saying,
never
I
know
think-
what they are.
You want?
There's always fine tuning to do after you get it put together.
I don't know what Joe looks like
figured that
Adolf
one out.
Hitler right there with his little mustache. Darren's left eye's going closed like a serial killer.
Terrorize tormented people like I normally do.
I'll never do one again. I'll never do one of these. Absolute misery. All it's been is misery. All the way through. Honestly, as much trouble as this car was, I think I'll have less actual trouble doing that CUDA than I will doing this. And this is it. You know, all those hours always culminate at the end
Into a beautiful
car.
artwork.
And as soon as you're done, you forget. You forget all the misery and the pain and the suffering, and all of a sudden it's just done and you're happy. There were a few things on that car we weren't done with. I mean, not much. A couple of trim pieces. I think the seat cover, they didn't make the hinge covers at that time. There's always a looky-loo. But, you know, we did the best and it was good. The Challenger that they brought out, that was a cool car. It was an RT SE 446 pack. One of the coolest things, it was a black car, burnt orange interior, leather seats, which is common standard with the SE. But it was a rim blow wheel, it was an AM8 track, and it was a gator grain roof. That was the V1G gator grain, and that's it looks just like alligator, it's simulated alligator skin.
What do you think of this?
It's okay. It's all right. This is also an M91 car, so you see the luggage rack on the back. It's a very rare car. See the formal back roof. Problems with the black car that I would like to just redo the whole car, and it was sold to us. You know, now, like I said, I would have preferred that Coronet, to be honest. But I mean, when you start adding up the values, the value of that car is a lot better today. That Challenger is probably a $150,000 car today, compared to that Coronet still flopping around 70, 80 grand. Maybe it's a done car. At the end of the day, it was a fairly smooth transaction. But boy, if you talk about the things that led up to it, that's what's always the toughest. As I look back over that car, I love the finished shots. It just looks beautiful, right? It's gorgeous. But I hated it. I hated working on it because everything was red. And that's what the hardest part for me was, coming up with good red original parts. Some of the car was original. Some of the car was nice. And it had the parts, the good donor parts. Some of them didn't. Some of the parts that we needed so much weren't there. And like I said, they just didn't make them. '69 Coronet, done, down the road. Happy customers on both ends as usual. Met my mark to a T. Larry ended up, he really liked the Challenger RTSC. I think he may still have that car. The owners that got this car, the dealership that got this car, sold it really quick. The red RT, yeah, they said that one went fast. At the end of this, you know, we were out of the woods on the unibody portion of the Phantom CUDA. So many things, so many moving parts back then. Yeah. It's interesting when you sit back and you watch the Pilot now and you know what went into it, to see where we've come right now and how much we have evolved as a show, a shop, as people. And this bit here at the end is one of my favorite bits. Watch behind us. See the light starting to glow? The license plate lights up. And now this is the POV, point of view, from inside that license plate opening up. There's a camera looking out, and that's actually through the filler neck hole of the 71 CUDA. Like it's watching us talk about it.
That's awesome.
That never made it in the episode, but I thought that was such a neat bit. So I say the same thing to the people at home. If you watch something like this and you think there are elements that you like, we'll try to put them back in. If you think there isn't a thing in there that's salvageable, you say that too, because Graveyard Carz is your show. It's not mine. I might own it, but it's not my show. It's not Royal's show. It's not the producer's show. It's the fans of Graveyard Carz and what they want to see. Okay, that's good. Now go to the right.
Frankenhurst Films. That's awesome. That's awesome.
There you go. So to me, at the end of the day, I think that's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. Come a long way.
Thanks for coming over.
You bet.
You know, you go back to 100 episodes. We started filming the pilot 11 years ago, 07. This is 2018.
First show was?
Our very first airing of Graveyard Carz, Season 1, Episode 1, was on June 14th, 2012.
Wow.
So we're only a little over 6 years right now, or not even quite 6 years, about 5.5 years, and we've already hit 100 episodes.
100 episodes. Nice. We're getting cars out?
And at the end of the day, yeah, we're getting cars. Well, you wouldn't know because you're never here. Look at the evolution of the CUDA. Again, you have to link that. Graveyard Carz, the show, the shop, and that CUDA are a testimony to the indomitable spirit of man. And that's, I know I like to get a little bit philosophical and dramatic, but look at it. They said the CUDA couldn't be done. They said GYC couldn't be done. They said the shop couldn't be done. And here it is today, done. Because we didn't accept no as an answer. If you remember at the end of Season 1, that car got dipped up in Portland. After it came back from the dipper, we looked at it, we inspected it, I think the first episode of Season 2. Then it went up in the rafters, and that's where it hung up until just a couple of years ago, where we got hot on it again. And at the end, when that car was done, we had a shop full of people. We had a whole world tuning in for the finale of that. And it's still one of the most celebrated and talked about cars on the planet today. I will ask this, Royal Yoakum. People say, where's Royal? Where's Royal?
Where's Waldo?
Where's Royal? If you would like to see Royal in the show more, he's every bit as he's my brother. Of course he's part of Graveyard Carz. He'll never not be part of Graveyard Carz. But it'd be really great to have you chisel time out of your precious schedule to come over and film more.
It's hard to do when I have 2 jobs and my own business.
But if you would like Royal to be in the show more, I would highly recommend
Don't change the subject.
stalking him on Facebook, Royal Yoakum, Yoakum. Find him, send him a message that says, Royal, we want to see you on the show more. There's a lot going on inside that bean of yours besides just malted barley and bong resin.
Yes, there is, Mark. Thanks, buddy.
You're a good man, Charlie Brown.
Yeah, there it is. Golly gee.